Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Hi, everyone. This is Cathy. I'm here at USA Prepares, and I will be interviewing Vince today. We will be talking about the care and maintenance of our appliances, our stoves, refrigerators, washers, dryers, air conditioners. So we'll see how much we can get in. So I just want to say, hi, Vince. How are you?
Cathy, I'm great. You know, I asked Jason at the beginning of the broadcast, and thank you, Jason, for engineering for us today. I asked him, has anyone ever done this, what we're doing right now, where someone who was a caller at one time became an instructor or broadcaster and who took the controls and ran the broadcast? Has that ever happened before? And neither one of us knows of anyone who's done that before. So, Cathy, you are the first. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted that you're doing this. And it takes a little bit of courage, you know, to get behind a microphone or a telephone and run a broadcast without being trained to do it. I'm impressed. I am impressed. And class, I know you are as well. So thank you for doing this, Cathy. So I am here to be interviewed.
That's right. And I'm sorry, I forgot to thank Jason, too. And thank you, Vince, for your kind words. Full disclosure here, some of what I'm going to be talking about is I have learned from watching and learning from doing, but a lot of it, too, I have learned from my husband. I try to help him if I can with certain things, or I've just gotten to the point where sometimes I just watch him now so that if I need to do it or I need to explain it to someone, at least I have a little bit of knowledge. So I haven't always been real good at that, but I am trying to learn more. And I've also learned from listening to Vince. Vince has talked about this a few different times. So a lot of times I'll have a little notebook there, or if I'm, have my, just a piece of paper, I'll write down ideas that I think might be helpful. So I have a few things, Vince, and what I'd first like to talk about is stoves, if that's okay. I am going to read off a few ideas on a few things that I wanted to bring up that I've learned, and then if you can fill in or you can correct me or add onto it, if that's okay with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. We have a propane stove, and I know that they come at a preset heat. And when we were here at our house, I had one that was way too high. It would just burn everything, and one that was way too low. And I didn't know that you could do it. So from what I watched my husband do was that he took the knob off, and there's an adjuster screw inside the stem, and then you can adjust it to going very low or very high. Is that correct, Ben?
That is correct. And that applies to most gas stoves that are propane as well as natural gas. So you're absolutely correct. And there's another component to that. And that is, what is the pressure of the gas, whether it be propane or natural gas, coming into your house? And there's a regulator for propane and a regulator for natural gas, and they're adjustable. And the way you adjust them is there is a large plastic. Now, this is a regulator that will be outside the home, and higher pressure gas comes into it, and then this regulator reduces the pressure to where it can be managed by the stove controls, because those stove controls can't handle high pressure. I'm talking about the knobs on the front of the stove. Well, there's a device called a manometer, M-A-N-O-M-E-T-E-R. I'm going to look it up on eBay to find out what they cost. And the pressure of the gas in your home that goes to, let's say, your gas furnace, your gas hot water heater, your gas stove, if you have any of those gas appliances, is regulated by this, it's adjusted or maintained by this regulator. Now, you can adjust the pressure up or down within a range to where it's supposed to be. And if the pressure is too high from the gas line coming in after the regulator, your flame will be too big. You'll be consuming too much propane or natural gas. So you can adjust it, and the device is called a manometer. Now, it's also measured in what's called a water column. Now, what that would be is if you took a piece of clear pipe, if you would, or clear plastic hose, and you stretched it vertically, and you connected that to the gas line. And I'm not suggesting you do it because it's very dangerous to do this. But if you did, the pressure of the gas line would, and you put water in this hose, it would push upward from the horizontal line upward a number of inches. And that's called a water column, and it's measured in water column inches. But you can buy a gauge with a dial that'll do the same thing, and that's what I bought. And I'm going to look up the price of it in just a few seconds. But that's what I use to adjust our gas line. And so you can put this device on, and what you should probably do is have someone inside the home and turn on the stove. Let's say turn on all the burners. And you have to do this safely. And then you adjust the pressure with the burners on, because if you adjust the pressure without the burners on, then you might not get a true reading of what it would be like if you're drawing gas through the regulator. So that's the way I do it. Now, I'm not sure if that's the way that's acceptable in the gas industry, but that's what I do. Because you could have your furnace come on, your gas furnace, at the same time you're trying, and your hot water heater, and you're trying to cook. And if that's the case, you will not have enough gas pressure. So it can be adjusted those two ways, the way I talked about and the way you talked about. And the way you talked about is the easy way. And I'm not saying it's not the right way, it's the right way, but it's way easier than buying a manometer.
Oh, Vince, I think that when we moved in, the man that came out and hooked up our propane, he did that. I remember watching him. He pulled the stove out, and he made sure that all the connections behind the back were correct. And he did that with maybe that's what the manometer, but I remember watching him check all the burners, and so I'm pretty sure that's what he did. So that's good information.
Yeah, and I'm looking at eBay right now. I can't find the one that I have, but they've got digital ones now. I wouldn't want a digital one. I'd want one with a dial and a mechanical one that doesn't need batteries, because I don't know if how long we'll be able to get batteries at reasonable prices. Who knows if what the supply of batteries is going to be. And I try to get mechanical tools rather than digital ones. But I'm still looking. I can't find the exact one that I have, but it has a dial. Here it is. It's called a low pressure manometer. Gauge, kit, gas, LPG, propane, furnace, manifold line, HVAC tool. So they have all the keywords in there. $57.77 for one very similar to the one I purchased. The one I purchased was probably like high 20s, maybe as much as $30. But now what I'm finding, by the way, Cathy, is pretty much everything that I would want to buy has doubled in price since the $600 checks were sent out. Everything has doubled. Anything that is a good quality piece of American gear, battery chargers, gauges, etc., things that used to be made in the United States, they've doubled in price, whether they're new or used, since, in 12 months. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the manometer. manometer.
Vince, the other thing I wanted to ask you and what your thoughts are is when you take off the cap or whatever on your propane stove on the top, and gas is probably the same way. It's got the orifices in there and they're brass. Those can get plugged, from what I understand, and I cleaned them before. But my husband brought out, it was called a welder's tip cleaning tool, and he said you can get them online and at the big box store, and there's little files in there, and he takes those very carefully and cleans that out. Do you have any other ideas on that, or why they would get plugged?
Well, I would think that
what you do.
Yeah, sure. It's possible, depending on the type of stove. It's possible that food bits can get in there, dust can get in there over the years, regardless of how clean one keeps a home. There's a lot of air that goes through that burner. And because of that, it draws air in, and you may be, one may be cooking in the oven, and there may be some burning in the oven, and those fumes can generally travel throughout the stove, and they can clog the orifice, as well as dirty natural gas or dirty propane. So what you probably could do is use a 1/4-inch drive socket set. Find the right socket for those. They're called, I think they're, those orifices, I think they're called spuds, S-P-U-D-S. I'm not sure if that's the right nomenclature or not. But they're little brass, they have threads on them, and they have one hole in them. And the whole orifice is the size of a brand new number 2 pencil eraser. That's the whole size of this. Not the pencil, just the eraser part, the rubber eraser part. And if you take that out carefully, and of course you want to have the gas off, you might be able to clean that out with a toothpick. Now, the reason I say take it out and clean it with a toothpick, because there's a hole in it. If you break the toothpick off in it, you probably have a tough time getting the broken part of the toothpick out. So you might want to take that brass orifice out. If you have 4 burners, you have 4 orifices. And what these do is they direct and reduce the flow of the gas into the burner, and then the burner head spreads out the gas. Another thing you can do, and we do, I will take we have a propane gas stove, and I believe it's called a slide-in. It might be called a drop-in, but the countertop is designed so that the stove just slides in and sets on the countertop. So it kind of looks like it's built in, but you can just slide that thing, lift it up and slide it out. It's propane, and I will take the burners. These are cast aluminum burners with a porcelain steel decorative cover on them. I'll take them out and put them in the kitchen sink, and I will scrub them with a scrub brush on the underside to make sure all the air passages are not blocked. And if any of them is blocked, you will see a yellow-tipped flame coming out, and that is incomplete combustion. So you're breathing more pollution in your kitchen if you have yellow tip flames rather than dark blue with a light tip. So you can look this up on the internet and look at what the flame should look like.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm talking with Vince about stoves and how to care for them. And I'd like to really quick talk about the electric burners and then maybe ovens to see if we can prevent any damage from them and to preserve those. Vince, you were talking about the propane burners, and I have one burner that's the power burner, and it gets real hot real quick, and that one boils over real fast. Even sometimes if I have it on real low, it just gets so hot that that one probably has to be cleaned. But it's just a word of warning to other people if they have the same problem.
Cathy, I've got a comment. So, class, if you go to the internet and you look up adjust gas flame, you can find some images of what the gas flame should look like. So, for example, if it's natural gas, it should be all blue. There'll be a light blue part of the flame in the center, and then rising up from that, it will be a darker blue. So it'll be more toward white at the origin of the flame, and then rising up from that, it'll be a light. It'll be blue, but a little darker than the center of the flame. Now, that's natural gas. Now, propane might have a very, very small tip it'll be a bright blue with more of a darker blue as the flame extends, and then you might have a slight yellow tip, a small amount, maybe 5% of the flame might be yellow, and that would be considered normal. Now, if you have more than that, that's not normal. That means that you've got incomplete combustion. So what you can do is shut off the stove and clean the burners. Now, some burners are removable. Most of them are, and you can soak them in the sink in a pot of water with some dishwashing detergent and scrub them with a brush. But if you have any small spills that have landed on the burner itself, you'll probably see some yellow areas of the flame. That's incomplete combustion. You want to clean that burner. Okay? Now, you can make sure you get all the water out. Rinse it after you've washed it and scrubbed it with like a fingernail type brush or a toothbrush. You might need to use a toothpick if there's any hard crusted, burned on food on there. But you want to get those burners clean so that you'll use less fuel and you'll have less pollution inside the house, because these flames emit toxic pollution. And when you use a gas stove, if you have an outside range hood or that vents outside, you should be using that. And they have screens to prevent grease and so forth clogging up the blower inside the range hood. And what we do is I take them out and put them in the dishwasher every couple of weeks. And you might find that yours is clogged up because after a couple months of cooking, the vapors that come from the food you're cooking clog these screens up. Now, you can buy replacements on eBay, and they're probably about $10 shipped. So if yours is all smashed and banged together so that air won't flow through it, you're going to need to probably replace it. I don't think you can restore it back to its original unsmashed condition. But you can soak them. You can wet them with warm water. You take them out, wet them with warm water, put some dishwashing detergent directly on these aluminum screens, and then scrub them with a brush. But try not to smash it together. Then after you're done with that, you can rinse it real well and put it in the dishwasher. And then every couple of weeks, repeat that process with the dishwasher. Wash it in the dishwasher. So, and make sure you put it in a place where it'll get plenty of splashed hot water from the dishwasher. So those are a few things that you can do. Back to you, Cathy.
Vince, I'm guilty of having them go over, so I'm sure mine need to be cleaned. And it's good to know that how to do that and how to check with the flame. Vince, can I ask you about the electric burners? If you have an electric stove, I'm guessing that I know they just pull out, but I'm guessing if they don't light, then you just have to buy a new burner.
Yeah. Why don't we've got just a few seconds. Why don't we address that when we come back after the bottom of the hour break? Will that be okay?
Oh, sure, Vince. We'll be right back.
All right. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Cathy. I'm here with Vince, and I'm interviewing him on appliances and maintenance, and now we're talking about stoves. And we were talking about electric burners and what to do if yours is not working right. Okay.
So, Cathy, we don't have an electric stove anymore. The last time we had one was probably in the 1990s. And the reason we don't have one is because if you have a generator and the power goes out, it's almost impossible to have one that is affordable, a generator that's affordable, that can run and power an electric stove or a cooktop. because they require so much current. For example, just one of the small burners, the little 8-inch or the 6-inch burners use about 1,500 watts. And that's an enormous amount of current. So we switched to propane many, many years ago, and that's all we've had ever since. And the reason is because we could still cook when the electricity fails. Okay? And a small generator can run, the important stuff in the house. And what's important is if you have a well, that's number one, running your well. But back to the electric burners if they don't work. One of the things that you can do, and I've done it. I did this when I was a child. My mom and dad had an electric stove. It was a General Electric, and those darn burners would fail all the time. So you can buy a replacement burner, and I'm at eBay right now, and class, you're going to be absolutely shocked at the cost of a replacement burner for your electric stovetop. Now, you can get one and I recommend Whirlpool, and that would be Whirlpool Maytag, and some Kenmore. I recommend those appliances as being the best overall of all the appliance brands. The Whirlpool makes it for the same company makes Maytag and some Kenmore. So Whirlpool is the focal point. They're the best. We have a General Electric gas stove, and I really don't like it, but it was one that someone bought at Lowe's when we were building the house, and it was half price. Someone bought it and said, "You know what? I don't like it." So they returned it unused, and I bought it for half price. So that was a major contributing factor as to why we have GE. I would never buy another General Electric appliance. They're lousy. Faster, the quality is not there. But anyway, back to, and this would apply to General Electric as well. The burners are replaceable. And if you've never done it before, if you never replaced an electric burner on your stovetop and it's not working right, first of all, you want to shut off the circuit breaker. That's what I would do for the stove. And it'll be marked. It'll be one of the larger breakers in your circuit panel. Shut that off. Make sure the controls are shut to off. And it will, once you've done that, it will take, if you've never done it before, 1 minute. Literally 1 minute to replace a burner. You lift up the side of the burner, and these are the coils. You lift up the side, make sure it's, cool to the touch. You lift up the side that is opposite the two, connection points, and you'll see them. There are two parts of the coil that go into a connector. And you just lift up opposite that. And then you slide the burner out. And then you slide the new burner in. Now, what do they cost? You're going to be absolutely shocked at the cost of these burners. And even with this massive inflation that we're experiencing, a replacement burner with shipping for a 6-inch burner that fits Whirlpool, Maytag, Kenmore, $9.79, less than $10. That's shipped. Now, the fancier burners, the ones that are glass, where the burner is actually embedded in glass, they cost a lot more, like 7 times more, like $65. But the standard ones, and that's what you should have, is standard burner element, less than $10. Now, let's say you want to replace all of them. Let's say you have the 2 large ones and 2 small ones. Shipped, $36. Shipped. So you can get these burners on eBay. I suggest you consider that. You can also get the burner bowls that go under the burner itself. So when something boils over, and it happens to everybody, happens to us too, when it boils over and the heat of the burner encrusts these reflective bowls that go under the burner, you can get replacements. And what do they cost? Well, they're pretty inexpensive as well. You can get black ones for that would be porcelainized for about $29 shipped for 4 of them, or you can get the standard aluminum type that are chrome plated, and a 4-piece set is $14.65 for all 4 of them. So sometimes they're called drip pan or drip bowls, and those are my thoughts on the electric stove. But Cathy, did you ask me how to make them last longer? Was that part of your question?
Yeah, if there was a way to do it, Vince, I don't know. I haven't had an electric stove in a long, long time.
Yeah, good for you. So class, if you happen to have one of these electric stoves, by the way, that means you're pretty much dependent on the utility grid. But you know, if you decide to move out to the country, go for propane, rather than natural gas. Because if you have natural gas, you're not far enough away from the city. Okay? Because natural gas isn't delivered to rural areas. That would be propane. That's what's available in rural areas. So if you have an electric stove and you want to make the burner last longer, you need to size the pot that you're going to cook with to the size of the burner. So if you use the large burner and a small pot, what happens is heat is transferred from the burner to the pot, except for the area that the pot doesn't cover. That means that glows red, and that gets too hot because you're not transferring the heat from the part of the burner that is not covered by the pot. So that causes those burners to overheat and wear out faster. So what you want to do is make sure you use the right size pot for the burner. It's as simple as that. And they'll last a lot longer. Now, these burners last a long time, but now that you know that for less than $10, you can go to eBay and find the burner to fit your electric stove, and you can be back in business. And literally, I was a child when I did it. If you call 10 years old a child, that's when I did it. Maybe 12. So anybody can do it. And just make sure that the connection is fully seated. And you'll be smiling from ear to ear that you didn't have to call, an appliance repair person, to come out for $100 and then charge you $50 for a $10 burner.
So Vince, that's just for an electric. That doesn't apply to propane or gas, right?
Correct.
For the pot
propane
size.
Or gas. That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
But what I always do when I'm cooking, and actually everybody in the whole house does this, we try to size the gas burner as well. So, for example, let's say the pot is a little bit smaller than the maximum size that burner flame could cover. I'll turn the flame down so that the flame does not exceed the bottom of the pot or pan. Okay? So that's the way I do it. And here's something else, Cathy. I have found that when I boil water for pasta, I have found that if I take the same size pot, let's say, and all of ours are pretty much Revere except for the cast iron Revereware, old Revereware from the 70s, maybe the 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I have found that a taller, smaller diameter pot takes longer to cook the same amount of water as a wider diameter pot with the same amount of water with a gas flame. And I believe the reason for that is the gas flame travels farther and has more surface contact with the bottom of the pot or pan if it's a larger diameter than a smaller diameter. Now, that's what I'm talking about, boiling water, for pasta, that kind of thing, or potatoes.
I agree, Vince. I use my Dutch oven all the time to boil water because it just boils so much faster than a taller pot. And you were talking about the propane stoves, and I've lived out in the country for quite a few years now, and people don't realize what you just said. If you lose power, you can't cook. But if you have a propane, you can light it with a lighter or a long match, and you can still use your stovetop. So you're not dependent on your cooking. At least you can boil things and cook things and make a meal. But if you have a stove and you don't have any power, an electric stove, then you can't cook anything. So, and I like propane. I like the instant on, instant off. And I don't burn things as much. But I have a Frigidaire, and it's probably at least 20 years old, but I'll tell you, it is made so well. You can just tell by looking at the newer ones now how they've cheapened everything up. But I wanted to mention when we moved in, the oven door, I couldn't see through it. There was all this grease and a film that was on it, and it had been bugging me. So last year I asked my husband, and he took the door off, and he took the door off and took it apart and was able to clean that glass. And I don't know if it bugged anybody else, but it always just bothered me that I could never get to it and clean it. It made the whole stove look so much nicer. So it's a little bit of a process. I mean, it took probably about 45 minutes to clean it and put it all back together, but it can be done. So if anybody has that problem, that's something you can do.
Cathy, when you mentioned taking the door off the oven, class, you can do that, but you have to know how. There are release clips or release levers on the hinge part of your door, and typically you'd put a flat blade screwdriver in that release mechanism, and you would move it into the unlock position, and it will unlock the hinges. So I suggest it's difficult to talk about how to do that on the radio, but just keep in mind that you can remove the door, and it's going to be quite heavy because it's insulated, and I'm talking about the oven door. Look it up on the internet and see exactly how to do your make and model. It's very simple, but have a surface prepared to put that down. So maybe you might want to put some like bath towels that you don't mind putting on the countertop, put them down and ready for the lowering of that stove door. And that's what we do. It's exactly what we do. And Cathy, you mentioned lighting the stove when the power fails. Absolutely, Cathy, you're right. You can use a gas stove, whether it be natural gas or propane, the stove top, when the power has failed. Now ours, and I'm sure just about everybody else's who's listening, has a stove with an electronic ignition because they haven't made pilot ignition stoves for a very long time, probably 30 years, maybe more. So that means that when you turn that knob to start your stove gas burner to operate, you'll hear a spark fire, click, 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 click. And that's like a spark of a spark plug in a car. And that spark will ignite the flame. But if you don't have electricity, you won't have that spark ignition. So what you would use is a match. And make sure your match is lit first before you turn on the gas, because otherwise you can have a big, huge flame if gas is escaping into the room and it's not being consumed by the flame.
Hi, everybody. This is Cathy. I'm interviewing Vince about stoves. Vince, can we talk about ovens real quick? We only got one appliance so far.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Sure. I've got some thoughts on ovens.
I have one question for you, if it's okay.
Of course.
I've heard the controversy on self-cleaning ovens, and me personally, I don't like it. I don't like the fact that it gets so hot that it just really, I feel like it feels like it's very hard on the oven. And I've read things that it can shorten the life of your oven. So me personally, I think I only used it once a long, long time ago, and I didn't care for it. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that. I believe
we have a self-cleaning oven. But I can't say for sure because we've never used that self-cleaning feature. But I can tell you this, it gets over 1,000 degrees in there. Now, normally you're baking or broiling and the temperature might hit 400, maybe. Typically 350, 375, right? Maybe 400. But when you hit 1,000 degrees, to me, it's dangerous for the cabinetry that's right, and in our case, our slide in or drop in, whichever it might be called, oven or stove is right next to the cabinetry, wood cabinetry. And I don't, paper burns a little over around 500 degrees, wood a little higher. I'm not interested in having 1,000 degree temperature in that stove box. And you're absolutely right. It can't help but be rough on the seals, the gaskets, everything in the oven. And there's so I'm with you. I would never do that. I would never use that. Now, if you have that feature, great. You paid for it, but I wouldn't use it. And I'd like to find one that, if I bought a new one that didn't have that feature. It's not so hard to clean an oven. Just, and that's one of the problems that we have in the United States. That we're just too lazy to do manual labor. But there's another component to the oven that we should probably address. and that has to do with the electricity. So if you have a gas, whether it's natural gas or propane oven, and the electricity fails, you know that you're not going to have the spark ignition. You know that. But also, there's what's called an igniter, I-G-N-I-T-E-R, in the baking side and probably the broiling side of the oven as well. And this little bugger is about the size of 2 dominoes, one end to end, 2 dominoes. And it has 2 wires and a connector. And this little bugger draws about 600 watts. And what it does is it glows red hot. So when you turn on the oven, this little igniter starts to glow brighter, brighter, brighter. And after it is full brightness, drawing 600 watts, then the gas is turned on. That's why there's a delay when you turn on the oven. You turn it on and you go, why isn't it lit? Well, it's waiting for this igniter to get red hot. And this igniter is powered up the entire time that the oven is on with a flame. So, and the reason for that is to prevent an explosion. Because if you don't have a pilot light for the oven, the way we used to have pilot lights for the oven and the stovetops, well, if you don't have a pilot light, the flame can go out, the gas still continues, and if there's a spark anywhere in the room, you can have an explosion. A big explosion. And it can kill people. It can kill people, everybody in the house, whether they're in the kitchen or not. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. And those igniters are also replaceable. On eBay right now, $14, $15, $20 a piece. I keep 2 of them in stock here at the house, just in case we want to use the oven, just in case they decide to not make those anymore. The brand that I have is Robert Shaw, R-O-B-E-R-T-S-H-A-W, Robert Shaw. That doesn't mean you should buy a Robert Shaw. I'm just saying that's the brand we have. I paid probably $25 each years ago for them. They've come down in price. Now you can buy them for $14.20. But if it fails, if this igniter fails, your stove will not light. The Baker broiler will not light. And you can replace this yourself, and you can look it up on the internet how to do it. It will probably, you have to take the oven door off so you can access it. You have to learn how to do that. And it's probably a half-hour job if you've done it before. If you haven't done it before, it might take 1 hour. But for $15 or less, you can fix it. So those are the thoughts. And by the way, stoves are adjustable to switch between natural gas and propane. And all the stoves that I've ever installed have a regulator as part of the stove. And with the General Electric, you put a wrench on, like a 1/2-inch wrench or 7/16, something like that. And you turn this brass fitting one way or the other. One way is natural gas, the other way is propane. And, Whirlpool might have a little button that you reverse in the regulator as part of the stove. But the stoves are reversible between natural gas and propane. At least all the ones that I've installed. So that's just one more thought about stove selection. But you will not be able to use your gas stove without power. You won't be able to use it in terms of the broiler or the bake.
Hi, everybody. This is Cathy. I'm interviewing Vince on USA Prepares in his hour 2. And we were just wrapping up our talk on stoves. Vince, I have one quick question, if I could. Well, really 2. What about the oven? If the oven doesn't light or fire up or heat, whatever the term is for that, what do you recommend?
Okay, if it does not, if it's a gas stove, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. If it's a gas stove, it's probably the igniter. And that's that device I was talking about. And you can go to eBay, class, and type in stove, S-T-O-V-E, space igniter, I-G-N-I-T-E-R, and you will see this device. And it's got 2 wires on it and a connector, and it's got porcelain twist on wire nuts. And it comes as a complete kit. There are 2 screws that hold it on, and you'll be able to replace this. And it might take a half an hour or an hour to do it if you've never done it before. But look it up, and that's the problem, most likely. It's the igniter. And because the stove, the gas will not flow unless the stove senses that this igniter has reached temperature, and it's got to glow red hot. Now, in the case of a power outage, you can light the stove top burners, to cook with pots and pans, but the bake and broiler will not work. They absolutely will not work without at least 600 watts of electricity. So you can consider even a propane or a gas stove, the stove part, the oven part, I should say, unusable in most cases unless you have electricity. But the top burners you can light with a match. And you have to be careful because, don't turn the gas on and then go looking for matches. You have to have that match lit, ready at the burner when you slowly turn on the gas. Okay? So, yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I might have like a dumb question, Vince, but is the igniter, is that the same thing as like the control board? Is that what they would call it if on an oven? Is there such a thing as like a control board or?
Yes.
On
yes.
propane? Okay.
Okay. Yes, there are control boards for electric stoves as well as gas stoves. And a lot of these modern appliances have computerized controls. And it's important to have a whole house surge protector on your house because your refrigerator is not generally on a surge protector. Your microwave oven is generally not on a surge protector. Your oven and stovetop are not on a surge protector. So if you have a whole house surge protector, then all of those devices are somewhat protected from surges and having those control boards, which are computerized, protected. Now, if you want to know if you have a computerized control board, all you have to do is look at the display. Does it have a clock? Does it have a digital clock? If it does, it's computerized. It's as simple as that. Same with the microwave oven, same with the range hood, same with all of these appliances. If they have a digital clock or a digital display, they are computer controlled. Now, the control board works with the igniter. So the control board tells the igniter to fire up and, the relay will close and that will engage electricity to flow through the igniter. The igniter in the bake or broil section of the oven will heat up red and glow red and red hot. And that it glows so hot that it will ignite the gas to burn. That's the purpose of the igniter. So without that igniter running constantly while the oven is on, you won't have a flame. If the igniter goes out, the flame goes out. It's as simple as that. So it's a safety thing, but it's also a nuisance because they burn out after a few years. That's why I keep 2 of them in stock, for our oven. And I know it's going to go bad. I just don't know exactly when. So that's why I have 2 of them. And, we've already gone through the original one has burned out. This now is 15 years. We don't use our oven very much, because it uses so much propane as compared to, like a turbo oven, electric turbo oven. So we use, when we have electricity, we use the turbo oven. When we don't have electricity, we use the propane. When I say don't have electricity, I'm talking about solar power. So on days like today, when it's overcast and we're not generating enough electricity to run, high consumption devices, we just don't. And I did want to mention one, news flash item. And this is kind of important, has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I did want to mention it. There's a recall of pet food right now. And this may affect you, class. The brand is Sport Mix. One word, SPORTMIX. It's being recalled by the Food and Drug Administration. It's killed more than 70 dogs. It's sickened 80. Now, it's a Midwestern Pet Foods has expanded their recall to several more products sold under its Sport Mix brand after these animals have died. And it's because of high levels, unsafe levels of toxins produced by mold. Now, I'm talking about, and you can look it up, Sport Mix recall. This affects cat food, dog food, puppy food. So, Sport Mix. And I would be absolutely frosted if my dog died because of their carelessness and recklessness at the company that manufactures Sport Mix. And I would let the company that sold it to me know that I'm furious with them and I want a full refund. Even if you only have a little bit left in the bag, I would demand a full refund. And if they didn't give it to you, I would call my credit card company and I would dispute the charge. And I would say, these guys have sold defective, toxic dog food and I want my full money back. And if you do that, you will end up with your money back for the dog food with tax, and you will hit the seller of the dog food with a $35 dispute charge. That's what the credit card company will charge them. So I just want to let you know, Sport Mix is dangerous right now. It has been recalled by the Food and Drug Administration for killing more than 70 dogs. And that's what they say now, but it's probably way more than that. How many? I don't know. Cathy, back to you.
You know, Vince, I have I think it goes in my email where it's a pet food recall, and I get them all the time. I just get these recalls all the time. Most of them I don't, they're not recognizable to me, so they must be under different names. But, back in the 90s, dogs and cats were killed with melamine, and they were in treats and dog food. And pretty much from that time, I cook most of I have a black lab, and I cook most of her food. I'll have a little dry kibble here and there, but it's normally a pretty good brand. But, boy, I would be frosted, too, if something happened to her. So, yeah, it's if you can look it up, I think it's called Pet Food Recall.
Yep. We lost one of our golden retrievers to that melamine, what'd you call it? Melamine additive. Now, what is melamine?
Yeah.
It's trash. It's waste. And it comes from China. Yeah. And what these pet food manufacturers did, and I believe it was Menu Foods, they're out of Canada, and if you think that, whatever brand you use is just the only brand manufactured by that company, it's not true. There are several, if not tens or 20 different labels of dog food that come out of the same factory. They have all kinds of names. So be really careful and look it up. You'll be surprised. But, they killed one of our dogs, and I'm furious with them. And, so be very, very careful. Do your research. And what I do, believe it or not, we have some of that kibble here. And what I do is I buy it in advance and I keep it absolutely cold and cool. I keep it in 55-gallon drums. And then I make sure that it hasn't been recalled for months. And then I feed it to the dogs, which is different from what many people might do. They buy it today and feed it today. So back to appliances, if that's where you'd like to go.
Sure. Vince, I have one quick question about there's such a thing called a nonstick oven liner. And I've heard controversy about those. Somebody got me one for Christmas. And the only reason, I don't know if they're safe, but it says at the very bottom of it, do not use in homes with pet birds. So that tells me that it's releasing some kind of a toxic fume or gas. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Teflon, right? So, it's, I believe it's PTFE, Teflon. And we know that the Teflon volatilizes at temperatures. So if they're saying don't use it when you have birds, what if you have people in the room? Are birds special? Well, maybe they're more sensitive, but there are people who have, sensitive lung and respiratory issues. Cathy, honestly, we don't have any Teflon products here in our house that we use. Now, we have had in the past pans, we'll call them pots. And, at one time, before we realized, and this is probably a couple decades ago, that they were dangerous when, the Teflon volatilizes when you heat it. And it actually gets into the foods. Well, we don't use it except for things like, that pot is too good to throw away, but not good enough to use. So what do we use it for? Well, we use it for maybe if we're going to change the oil on a lawnmower. Okay. Might use it for that. That's it. In the garage, or in the barn, but not in the kitchen. Okay. We don't use them for, water bowls for the dogs. And if you notice, pretty much every Teflon coated product that you've ever used over time, the Teflon flakes off. Now, where did it go? Did it disappear, or did it become part of the food? And if it became part of the food, did you eat it? And the answer is yeah, you probably did. Okay. So what would that be? That'd be like a George Foreman type grill. That would be a nonstick pot, nonstick pan. They all have chunks missing from them. So, and then when the chunks get to the point where you go, this is terrible. We need a new one. That's when you stop using it as much, typically. So the answer is don't use it. Cathy, if you could return and get your money back, that's what I would do.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I haven't even opened it. I read that, and I didn't want to use it in the first place. But, okay, Vince, can we talk about dishwashers? I have a couple things. I have a real quick, funny story. We had a dishwasher that wouldn't work, and I think I told this before, but I'll make it real quick. My husband replaced several electronic features on it, and I kept mentioning that it was the door switch. And he replaced something else, and he checked it, and he said, no, that's not it. So he replaced something else, and then finally he replaced it, and it was the door switch. And the only reason I knew that was because it happened on one of our other dishwashers. So now he calls me the dishwasher repair lady.
What a great story. What a great story. And you can look these things up on the internet. You can say, dishwasher, Whirlpool or whatever the brand is, and the symptom, and you'll find out some of the solutions.
Hi, everybody. This is Cathy. I'm here with Vince. I'm interviewing him today, and we're going to talk about dishwashers. Vince, couple things that I have done, and I'm sure you can expand on it, but one of the things that I do, and I make sure that I run a pot of hot water, especially if I know I'm going to be cooking, I'll run the water and get it real hot, and then I add my dishwasher detergent. I make my own, and basically mine is just half baking soda and half borax, and I stir it up real good. Sometimes you can add a little bit of citric acid to it, but what I like to do is I like to put the citric acid in the extra little compartment that you have right next to it, and I have well water, and it's a little hard, and since I've been doing that, I think it's really cleaned out my dishwasher, and it really makes all my glasses and everything so much cleaner. So it's a nice tip for someone if they're just not getting the cleaning part of their glasses and their dishes and silverware. And I haven't had any trouble with it making any etching or anything like that. So I've done it on just regular glasses just to see if it would do anything, and it's worked really well. But a couple things that I do is I make sure I rinse the dishes off pretty well so there's not a lot of food on there. And there's a little garbage disposal at the bottom, and my feeling is if you have a lot of stuff on your dishes and you just throw them in there, then it probably can get plugged and you got to clean it, or maybe it just doesn't clean as often. But I run my water real hot, and then I put my dishes in there, and I load it in a certain way just to make sure that it gets clean, because if you block those arms and they can't go around, then it's there, even if it can go, but if you got like a big pan or something, it's not going to come and get most of your dishes. So those are some things that I do, and I make sure that there's a little screen at the bottom, a little filter, and it twists, like mine goes to the right or left, and then you could get like labels or hair or food or tape or whatever in there, so you want to clean that out periodically. But that's a few things that I do. Do you have any other tips for that, Vince?
I do, but first I'd like to make a comment, and then I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
The comment, Cathy, is, the announcer, Ron Allen, the big voice, who is a USA Prepares instructor, the announcer of, that fires up the broadcast. I have never, after that starts, then I would start talking behind the microphone. So for all the time I have been on the air, about 10 years, I have never not started a broadcast. Today is the first time where I am sitting back and you are at the controls. You're running the broadcast. This is a first. So that being said, what is your reaction to running the broadcast?
I'm a little nervous, to be honest, because you make it look so effortlessly, and I'm just a rank amateur. I've never done this before. I called into your show, I don't know, probably like March or April of last year, and I don't know, we just talked, and it felt like it was somebody, like we were like-minded. It was just like with Gwyneth. The first time I talked with Gwyneth, it was just like we'd known each other. And it was very easy, but I'm a little nervous because I know this goes nationwide and I don't want to mess up and make you embarrassed.
You're doing a great job. And the reason I mention this is I want to compliment you, because I don't think ever in the history of radio that someone who called in, has taken over a broadcast. And I'm delighted. I am absolutely delighted. And I wanted to mention one other thing before I talk about dishwashers and answer some of your questions. I've never seen this before, and it's a wonderful, wonderful experience for me to watch how you have gone from a caller to a broadcaster, co-hosting, and then running the show. It's never been done before, as far as I know.
Hi, everybody. This is Cathy. And interviewing Vince today. We're talking about dishwashers now. Vince, I had two quick things I forgot to mention, and then I want your response to the care and preserving a dishwasher. One was, sometimes the switch isn't on, and people might have turned the switch off on the wall. So from what I understand, it's the garbage disposal and the dishwasher switch are on the same circuit. So if it doesn't turn on, maybe check that. Maybe somebody bumped it or they turned it off accidentally. And the other thing is, because I have well water, my husband was telling me yesterday that there's a filter in the charge line, and you have to turn off the water and then take the line off the pump and then rinse it or scrub it with a toothbrush, because you could get like a buildup of lime or material on there. So anyway, Vince, I want your thoughts on the dishwasher.
Okay. I have several thoughts. First, we do what you do. When I wash dishes, and I wash them right away. So right after the meal, they get washed, or the utensils get soaked. And what I do is I have a cottage cheese type container, 24-ounce size, those plastic containers that cottage cheese comes in, or sometimes a delicatessen potato salad. If you go to a delicatessen anymore, I don't know who would do that anymore, but those size containers, I keep them full of water. And the rule is that if you have knives, forks, spoons, etc., they go in there and they soak. Okay, because otherwise, if you just throw them in the bottom of the sink, they get the water on them evaporates and they get hard and crusty, and they plug up that filter that you're talking about. So if you soak them, and that's what I do, and I run the hot water and then scrub all the utensils with a scrub brush. It's small. It might be called a fingernail brush. It's probably about 3-4 inches long. And I scrub the forks, the knives, the spoons, and all the food that adheres to that, I scrub off after it's been soaked. And I use the same scrub brush on the plates and so forth, and they go into the dishwasher. Now, the water's already hot because I've used the hot water. And I've brought the hot water to the kitchen sink, and right next to the kitchen sink is the dishwasher. So ready to go, hit the start button. Now, we don't use that superheated air dry. We just have, the heated dry. We have the regular dry. And we don't use the the sterilizing wash either, because that uses a lot more electricity, and I don't think it's necessary. So the dishwasher works fine, and we save electricity because we just use the standard cycles. But the food is already washed off the dishes before the dishes go in. And we align the dishes exactly the way you do to make sure that the arms that spray the water cover everything. Okay? Some people just throw the dishes in there any old which way. Well, there's a science to it, or an art to it, and you can maximize the efficiency. But we don't turn the dishwasher on unless it's full. Okay? So those are some of the things. Now, about the hard water and the well water. We have well water, and it's hard, which means it has lots of calcium in it. And what we have in our plumbing system, first thing right out of the well pressure tank is a whole house water filter. And it's a standard size water filter. It's about a foot in height and about maybe 2.5 inches in diameter, 2 inches in diameter, something like that. And all the water that is used domestically for faucets and the toilets and the kitchen sink, etc., goes through this filter. And it's 5 microns. And the idea is that the particles that will clog up the screens and the valving, etc., get filtered. Then the water goes into a water softener. Now, the reason for the water softener is to remove the hardness. And if you have one of these things, it's going to cost about $500 for one. The best brand to get right now would be made by Morton, at least in my opinion. And that used to be the Whirlpool one. I guess Whirlpool sold the manufacturing to Morton. And so that's what I would consider right now. Maybe 30,000 grain model or 35,000 grain model. And it will use salt, and you'll probably use a bag of salt a month or so. And the salt's going to cost about $5 or less. And it will remove the hardness from the water. And what that means is you will be using probably 1/4 to 1/2 of the detergent that you would use in your dishwasher and your clothes washing machine. So you will drive down the amount of detergent that you use, and you will probably prevent having these filters, these screens, etc., being clogged up, like the washing machine screens that get clogged with the lime deposits that are in hard water. Those are my thoughts about dishwashers. And if you're going to buy one, I would buy a Whirlpool. That would be my first choice. Whirlpool, Maytag, Kenmore, if the Kenmore is made by the Whirlpool company. And I'm so concerned about modern dishwashers, the control boards, the valving, etc., that I bought a couple more dishwashers on Craigslist. So there are people who have a white one and they go, shoot, we need a black one. So somebody in the house will say, we need a new dishwasher because I don't like the way it looks. So they'll sell their white one because it doesn't match maybe the refrigerator, or they want the stainless steel look, and they'll get rid of their dishwasher for that reason. So I have 2 spare dishwashers. And they are the same control boards, the same tub, the same motor, the same valving, the same everything as the one that's in the kitchen right now, which happens to be a Kenmore Whirlpool. The other thing is, I've bought these dishwashers used for about $100. A basket. If you decide that you need a new basket for your dishwasher, you're going to spend about $135 for a basket. So if you buy a used dishwasher that has a good basket, it's not missing the vinyl tips, the vinyl coating on the rack, you're $135 ahead. So, and one other thing, you can buy replacement liquid vinyl. It doesn't work too well. I've tried it. But if you have the beginnings of chipping on your rack, you can buy a matching color. If it's gray, you can buy gray or white. And if you clean off, take the rack out, wash it outside, make sure you get all the detergent off it, you can then paint it with what would be like a nail polish brush out of the little bottle, and paint on the liquid vinyl. Now, it'll last a while, but it won't last anywhere near as long as the original coating on the rack. If you want to make your rack last longer, all you have to do is be careful how you load it. So don't just throw dishes in there and bang, 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 the same spot on the rack with the same dishes every day. Gently load it. Don't hit those the plates hard on the rack, and they will last much, much longer. Those are some of my thoughts on dishwashers. Oh, one other thing. Insulate the pipes. So if you have pipes under the kitchen sink for the hot water, you can buy foam insulation, cut it with a knife or a razor blade, and single-edge razor blade, and insulate the pipes. so the hot water will stay hot longer. And the other thing you can do is if you decide to pull out your dishwasher, there are typically 2 screws at the top that attach to the underside of the countertop that keep your dishwasher from rolling out. If you decide you want to pull it out and look at the insulation, you can put more insulation around the tub of the dishwasher to help it retain more of the heat that it already has in it. And that way you won't have to keep heating the water with the electric element and use more electricity. So in the long run, you can add more insulation to your dishwasher. Just make sure you don't cover the motor and have the motor, the electric motor, covered with insulation and have it get the air intake for the motor get choked off and burn up the motor. Those are some of my thoughts on dishwashers, Cathy.
Vince, can I make a couple comments?
You're running the show.
Okay. Couple things. You had mentioned about, soaking the silverware. I do the same thing. If I have a little pot, like a little saucepan or a bowl, I do the same thing. I throw all the silverware in there, and then basically you barely have to rinse it off because most of it just comes off in there before I put it in the dishwasher. But sometimes if I know I'm going to be in the kitchen and I'm going back and forth, maybe I'm making a soup or a pot of beans, and if I'm going to run the dishwasher, I'll take a big stock pot with a lid and I'll fill that up with the hot water, and then I'll put some soap in there, and then I put the lid on, and that way if I'm not coming back to cook right away, I still have hot water basically for a couple hours. And then I can just use that instead of using like the open sink. It gets cold pretty quick if you do it that way. So that kind of helps me if I'm in and out of the kitchen. The other thing I bought that I love, it's called a bottle brush. It's got a long handle and it's got a cylinder end on it, and you can get down in bottles and vases and cups. And I use that quite a bit because sometimes if you have a cup, maybe you had a smoothie or something with a residue in there, it's tough to get your hand in there. But if you run that bottle brush in there, then you can get a lot of that extra film out. So what I did with my old bottle brush that was really getting kind of worn out was in my bathroom, there's something about the way that our toilets are where I cannot get in there with the regular toilet roll brush. It's just too big. So I took that old bottle brush and I used like an old crock to put it in the bathroom just to use it in there. But I can get down in there and really clean it because of our hard water. I have to kind of clean my toilet bowls almost every day. But I also use it in the back of the water tank. I can get around all that back there where you get that buildup of the scum and everything back in the water tank. So, and you can get them anywhere. I actually found a nice one at Bed Bath & Beyond, but Costco had them a couple of years ago, and I bought 2 sets because it was like less than a third of the price of what I got at Bed Bath & Beyond. So that's something to think about if you're having the same issues. But the bottle brush is like, I love that more now than any of the other brushes that I use in the kitchen for long, tall cups and glasses. The other thing I wanted to mention was you talked about buying like the dishwasher. When we moved into the house, we had a real nice Frigidaire gallery refrigerator. Well, they had a lot of problems with sulfur, so all the copper on the back had been ruined, and the compressor was ruined. So my husband took off all the parts of that refrigerator. It wasn't that old. And he took off the handle, the plastic drawers, the bins, the control panel, the ice cube maker. And I think by the time that he was all said and done, my son put everything on eBay. I think we made like $450 with all the parts that people wanted. I think we sold everything that we had. So that's something to think about. But Vince, you have a great idea of buying the same model, and then you can take parts off of it if you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Whirlpool is, in my opinion, the way to go. Now, we do have a Frigidaire freezer and refrigerator in our kitchen, and it's been okay for 15 years. Both of them have been working just fine. So I'm okay with Frigidaire, and I'm okay with Whirlpool. And Frigidaire was bought by Electrolux. So, and Electrolux is not a USA company. But anyway, or at least they weren't. So that works fine. I'm with you on the Frigidaire as well. Do you have more questions for us or me on the other side?
Yeah, when we come back, can we talk about the refrigerator real quick?
You bet. You bet.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cathy. I'm interviewing my friend Vince, and we're going to try to squeeze in a few tips on the refrigerator before the time runs out. Vince, what I have learned and what I've done for years is I found that by cleaning underneath the refrigerator and cleaning the coils off, some are worse than others. I've had some where, boy, I'd spend half an hour with a appliance brush and a vacuum cleaner and a flashlight trying to get all the dog hair and all the things that the dust and even paper sometimes get sucked under there. So I've done that. And then the other thing I learned was I know that when Kevin was on, he mentioned using a real thin coat of Vaseline. And I know my husband uses the dielectric grease on rubber seals. He does the car doors, the garage door opener, refrigerators, freezers. He said basically all the rubber seals. So I want to know what your opinion is on those two things. And also, if it stops cooling, is the first thing that you would look for is the thermistor, and is that hard to replace?
Okay, I didn't hear would I look at, you mentioned something, and is that hard to replace? What was that part?
The thermistor. If it
Thermistor?
stops cooling, is that, yes.
Or a thermostat? Okay, here's what I would do.
Yeah.
Number one, you talked about vacuuming the coils. Most of the coils are underneath the refrigerator or freezer, in most cases, not all cases. But either the condenser, as it's called, is in the skin of chest freezers, so that's why it feels warm when the compressor's running, or it's if it's in the kitchen, it would be the coils would probably be underneath where you see that vent in the bottom. And that's where you're talking about vacuuming out. Now, some have the coils in the back, and you just roll the refrigerator out or slide it out. But new refrigerators and freezers have the feature of not having rollers. So the accountants decided that we don't need any rollers. It costs like $3 more. We don't need them. So most refrigerators and freezers don't have them anymore. So what I do is I spend about $15 on eBay and get them at Jeff Bezos' warehouse at Amazon. And they are these refrigerator and freezer rollers. So there's two sets. They're like roller skates. They have a whole bunch of these little rollers on them, and they have plastic rollers. And I put them under all of our appliances, whether it be a chest freezer, an upright freezer, a kitchen freezer, or a kitchen refrigerator. So you need two of them, and they come in a set for each appliance. Now, what that does, it does several things. If you need to get behind it and clean it, you can roll it out. If you use these, it will jack up the height of your refrigerator or freezer by about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. Now, the reason for that is that lets more air underneath, more air to circulate, more air for cooling those coils underneath. So your refrigerator or freezer will run slightly less because you'll have better heat exchange, meaning remove the heat from the coils and dump it into the air. So it makes your refrigerator run a little more efficiently. That's number one. Number two, yes, absolutely vacuum. And I'm thinking, every month or two would be a good idea. And you can use some kind of a brush to help loosen the dust, the hair from the dogs and cats, etc., from those coils. That works really well. And then what would I check if the unit stopped cooling? Well, for about $10 on eBay right now, you can buy something called a hard start kit. Now, what this thing is it looks like a little cylinder with a black cap, and it has a couple wires coming out of it, actually like 5. And what this is when there's a capacitor that helps start the compressor of a refrigerator or a freezer, and they go bad. And you can bypass all that or supplement that with this hard start kit. And the instructions come with it, tell you exactly what to do. If you've never done it, it'll take you about an hour. If you have done it, it'll take you half an hour. And you just add this little accessory to your wiring. And most of the time, it will give you another few years of life of your compressor. And it absolutely works. I keep 2 of them here at the farm. 2 of these hard start kits. Now, there's some cautions. Number 1, you need to get the right size. So they have them for different horsepower ratings. Like you can get, a quarter and a third horsepower, or different horsepower ratings. Make sure that you read the compressor. There's a label on the compressor, which is underneath your refrigerator in almost all cases, and freezers. And it will tell you the compressor horsepower rating. Make sure that the hard start kit that you get is for that size compressor. Not bigger, not smaller. It won't work if it's too big or too small. So get the right size and expect to spend $10 or less. Now, I suggest y'all get one now. And the reason is, I know for a fact that your compressor is going to quit. I know it. Because they've all quit at one time or another for us. So I have these kits, and I just pop them in. And if it quits on a Sunday, and you've got a freezer load of food, you're out of luck. You're out till, a few days. So for $10, you can have insurance against that. Cathy, your comments.
That's great advice, Vince. I mean, for $10 and a little knowledge, and it's been wonderful talking to you today, Vince. I appreciate it.
Cathy, we didn't get through all the appliances. We'll have to do this again and again, right?
Thanks. Sounds good, Vince.
Sounds good to me, too.